Okay. He made a few more jerky movements up and down several times, casting a long glance at the lavatory pan. Then he suddenly ripped down his shorts. "Excuse me, old man," he said. "I can't help it. It's the waiting." He plumped his large posterior on the lavatory pan. Winston covered his face with his hands. Smith, yelled the voice from the telescreen. 6079, Smith W., uncover your face. No faces covered in the cells. Winston uncovered his face. Parsons used the lavatory loudly and abundantly. It then turned out that the plug was defective, and the cells stank abominably for hours afterward. So Parsons pooped in the communal lavatory pan, or the communal toilet, and then the plug that, I'm assuming the plug that it didn't work, and they are, if you've been on a tour bus, or one of those nice buses with the movie screens, and then somebody's like, "I gotta poop," and everybody in the bus is like, "You better not, I know exactly what's gonna happen," and then they do it anyway, and then it smells. I was in band, and yeah, disgusting. No. So that's what this is like. Parsons was removed. More prisoners came and went mysteriously. A woman was consigned to room 101, and Winston noticed seemed to shrivel and turn a different color when she heard the words. A time came when, if it had been morning when he was brought here, it would be afternoon, or if it had been afternoon, then it would be midnight. There were 6 prisoners in the cell, men and women, all sat very still. Opposite Winston there sat a man with a chinless, toothy face, exactly like that of some large, harmless rodent. His fat, mottled cheeks were so pouched at the bottom that it was difficult not to believe that he had little stores of food tucked away there. His pale gray eyes flitted timorously from face to face and turned quickly away when he caught anyone's eye. The door opened and another prisoner was brought in, whose appearance sent a momentary chill through Winston. He was a commonplace, mean-looking man who might have been an engineer or technician of some kind, but what was startling was the emaciation of his face. So emaciation is when you're so hungry and you start to kind of cave in on yourself. So if you're starving, then you would be described as emaciated. It was like a skull. Because of its thinness, the mouth and eyes looked disproportionately large, and the eyes seemed filled with a murderous, unappeased hatred of somebody or something. The man sat down on the bench at a little distance from Winston. Winston did not look at him again, but the tormented, skull-like face was as vivid in his mind as though it had been straight in front of his eyes. Suddenly he realized what was the matter. The man was dying of starvation. The same thought seemed to occur almost simultaneously to everyone in the cell. There was a faint stirring all the way around the bench. The eyes of the chinless man kept flitting toward the skull-faced man, then turned guiltily away, then being dragged back by an irresistible attraction. Presently he began to fidget on his seat. At least he stood up, waddled clumsily around the cell, dug down in the pockets of his overalls, and with an abashed air held out a grimy piece of bread to the skull-faced man. There was a furious, deafening roar from the telescreen. The chinless man jumped in his tracks. The skull-faced man had quickly thrust his hands behind his back, as though demonstrating to all the world that he refused the gift. "Bumstead," roared the voice. 2713 Bumstead J. Let fall that piece of bread. The chinless man dropped the piece of bread on the floor. "Remain standing where you are," said the voice. "Face the door. Make no movement." The chinless man obeyed. His large, pouchy cheeks were quivering uncontrollably. The door clanged open. As the young officer entered and stepped aside, there emerged from behind him a short, stumpy guard with enormous arms and shoulders. He took his stand opposite the chinless man, and then, at a signal from the officer, let free a frightful blow with all the weight of his body behind it, full in the chinless man's mouth. The force of it seemed almost to knock him clear of the floor. His body was flung across the cell and fetched up against the base of the lavatory seat. For a moment he lay as though stunned, with dark blood oozing from his mouth and nose. A very faint whimpering or squeaking, which seemed unconscious, came out of him. Then he rolled over and raised himself steadily on his hands and knees. Amid a stream of blood and saliva, the 2 halves of a dental plate fell out of his mouth. So, this guy comes in, and he is starving. And there's a man in there, and he is he's big. And the big guy has apparently some bread in his pocket. And so he attempts to make a kind gesture towards the starving man and give it to him. And the telescreen yells at them to drop it. And then the guards come in. And if you notice in that moment, the starving man immediately knows what to do. He immediately puts his hands behind his head. He knows exactly so he's been here, obviously, for a long time. He's starving. And so he knows the ropes. He knows that he has to make sure that they know that he did not accept that gift. So the guards come in, and they see the guy. Wow. They see the guy who offered the bread, and he's, standing with his hands behind his head because that's what the telescreen told him to do. And they just go and punch him in the face so hard that the dental plate falls out of his mouth. The prisoners sat very still, their hands crossed on their knees. The chinless man climbed back into his place. Down on the side of his face, the flesh was darkening. His mouth had swollen to a shapeless cherry-colored mass with a black hole in the middle of it. From time to time, a little blood dropped from the breast of his overalls. His gray eyes still flitted from face to face more guiltily than ever, as though he were trying to discover how much the others espied him for his humiliation. The door opened. With a small gesture, the officer indicated the skull-faced man. That's the starting one. "Room 101, he said. There was a gasp and a flurry at Winston's side. The man had actually flung himself onto his knees on the floor, with his hands clasped together. "Comrade, officer," he said, "you don't have to take me to that place. Haven't I told you everything already? What else is it you want to know? There's nothing I wouldn't confess. Nothing. Just tell me what it is and I'll confess it straight off. Write it down and I'll sign it anything. Not room 101. Room 101, said the officer. The man's face, already very pale, turned a color Winston would not have believed possible. It was definitely, unmistakably, a shade of green. And when you get a shade of green, you're about to be sick. "Do anything to me," he yelled. "You've been starving me for weeks. Finish it off and let me die. Shoot me, hang me, sentence me to 25 years. Is there somebody else you want me to give away? Just say who it is and I'll tell you anything you want. I don't care who it is or what you do to them. I've got a wife and 3 children. The biggest of them is 6 years old. You can take the whole lot of them and cut their throats in front of my eyes and I'll stand by and watch, but not room 101. So apparently room 101 is so bad that this man with a wife and 3 children would rather watch all of them get their throats slit in front of him than go to this room. "Room 101, said the officer. The man looked frantically round at the other prisoners as though with some idea that he could put another victim in his own place. His eye settled on the smashed face of the chinless man. He flung out a lean arm. "That's the one you ought to be taking, not me," he shouted. "You didn't hear what he was saying after they bashed his face. Give me a chance and I'll tell you every word of it. He's the one that's against the party, not me." The guard stepped forward. The man's voice rose to a shriek. "You didn't hear him," he repeated. "Something went wrong with the telescreen. He's the one you want. Take him, not me." That happened? Did something happen to the telescreen? And the guy with the mashed up face now, the one who was punched, did he say something? No, he didn't. This man is so ready to make up anything to incriminate somebody else. So ready to throw somebody else under the bus for anything. The 2 sturdy guards had stooped to take him by the arms, but just at this moment he flung himself across the floor of the cell and grabbed one of the iron legs that supported the bench. He had set up a wordless howling like an animal. The guards took hold of him to wrench him loose, but he clung on with astonishing strength. For perhaps 20 seconds they were hauling at him. The prisoners sat quiet, their hands crossed on their knees, looking straight in front of them. The howling stopped. The man had no breath left for anything except hanging on. Then there was a different kind of cry. A crick from the guard's boot had broken the fingers of one of the hands. They dragged him to his feet. So he lays on the ground, and they're in this small cell, so that he grabs on to the the benches. They're bolted down, so he grabs onto the legs of the benches on either side of the room and is just hanging on for dear life. And they're pulling at him, but he has this adrenaline strength. He does not want to go to room 101, and he is hanging on. And so the guard comes over and smashes his fingers on one hand so that he'll let go, and then they drag him to his feet. "Room 101, said the officer. The man was let out, walking unsteadily with head sunken, nursing his crushed hand, all the fight gone out of him. A long time passed. If it had been midnight when the skull-faced man was taken away, it was morning. If morning, it was afternoon. Winston was alone and had been alone for hours. The pain of sitting on the narrow bench was such that often he got up and walked about, unreproved by the telescreen. The piece of bread still lay where the chinless man had dropped it. At the beginning it needed a hard effort not to look at it, but presently hunger gave way to thirst. His mouth was sticky and evil-tasting. The humming sound and then wavering white light induced a sort of faintness, an empty feeling inside his head. He would get up because the ache in his bones was no longer bearable, and then would sit down again almost at once because he was too dizzy to make sure of standing on his feet. Whenever his physical sensations were a little under control, the terror returned. Sometimes with a fading hope he thought of O'Brien and the razor blade. It was unthinkable that the razor blade might arrive concealed in his food, if he were ever fed, More dimly, he thought of Julia. Somewhere or other she was suffering, perhaps far worse than he. She might be screaming with pain at this moment. He thought, if I could save Julia by doubling my own pain, would I do it? Yes, I would. But that was merely an intellectual decision, taken because he knew that he ought to take it. He didn't feel it. In this place you could not feel anything except pain and the foreknowledge of pain. Besides, was it possible when you were actually suffering to wish for any reason whatever that your own pain should increase? But that question was not answerable yet. So we know we're going to answer that question. So Winston says, well, if I knew that Julia was suffering worse and I was being tortured, would I tell them to double my pains to let her free? And he's like, right now, yeah, but I'm not feeling that pain right now. Would it change when I am actually feeling that pain? And he's like, yeah, I don't know. But he says yet. We haven't answered it yet. So we will. The boots were approaching again. The door opened. O'Brien came in. Winston started to his feet. The shock of the sight had driven all caution out of him. For the first time in many years, he forgot the presence of the telescreen. They've got you too, he cried. They got me a long time ago, said O'Brien with a mild, almost regretful irony. He stepped inside. From behind him there emerged a broad-chested guard with a long black truncheon in his hand. You knew this, Winston, said O'Brien. Don't deceive yourself. You did know it. You have always known it. Yes, he saw now. He had always known it, but there was no time to think of that. All he had eyes for was the truncheon in the guard's hand. It might fall anywhere, on the crown, on the tip of the ear, on the upper arm, on the elbow. The elbow. He slumped to his knees almost paralyzed, grasping at the stricken elbow with the other hand. Everything had exploded into yellow light. Inconceivable that one blow could cause such pain. The light cleared and he could see the other two looking down at him. The guard was laughing at his contortions. One question at any rate was answered. Never, for any reason on earth, could you wish for an increase of pain. Of pain you could wish only one thing, that it should stop. Nothing in the world was so bad as physical pain. In the face of pain there are no heroes. No heroes, he thought over and over as he writhed on the floor, clutching uselessly at his disabled left arm. So O'Brien has been captured years and years ago and set up a sting to catch other people looking to join the Brotherhood by giving them the book to incriminate them further. So O'Brien has been working for the party for a very long time. But this is interesting because it says they got you too. They got me a long time ago. So they got O'Brien. Conceivably, he was here in the Ministry of Love. And then they let him out. And his job, you know how they give you jobs? His job was to collect other people. And that's where I'm going to leave off because now we're in chapter 2.